On the night of September 26, 1983, the air was cool and an underlying tension lingered, an almost daily reality of those times. The Cold War was in full swing, and every shift at the secret Soviet Early Warning Command Center, Serpukhov 15, felt like a ticking time bomb. Lieutenant Colonel Stanislav Petrov of the Soviet Armed Forces was on duty, intently focused on the flickering screens that monitored the airspace over the Soviet Union. Little did he know that on this night, the fate of the world would rest in his hands, and he would forever leave his mark on history, though no one outside would even have a clue. The silence was broken only by the monotonous ticking of the clock, a constant reminder of the passing time. Petrov, exhausted after hours of vigilance, could barely keep his eyes on the screens. Suddenly, a terrifying alarm sounded, a noise that could signal the worst. Petrov swallowed nervously, trying to maintain his composure despite his heart pounding wildly. On the screen before him appeared a warning. The early warning system had detected the launch of a ballistic missile from the United States. Everything happened so quickly that Petrov's breathing sped up and sweat began to trickle down his forehead. Seconds later, a second alarm, then a third, and a fourth. 5 missiles. The signals were clear. The United States had launched a nuclear attack on the Soviet Union. Petrov was an experienced officer. He knew exactly what the protocol demanded. In such a situation, he should immediately inform his superiors. The command had the responsibility of deciding on a counterattack. This would mean one thing: the beginning of a nuclear war, which could lead to the deaths of hundreds of millions of people around the world. He was only minutes away from a decision that could unleash an apocalypse. But something in Petrov's mind wouldn't let him act automatically. He began to analyze the situation. 5 missiles? Why only 5? He knew that such an attack should be massive, not consisting of just a few missiles. In his mind, 2 forces were battling: duty and instinct. One wrong move and a bad decision could mean the end of civilization as we know it. Petrov's thoughts swirled, creating a storm in his mind. What if he was wrong? What if it wasn't a system error, but a real attack? In such a scenario, the USSR would have no defense, and the United States could wipe his homeland off the map. Millions of innocent people, families, children, the elderly, could die in the blink of an eye. And him? He would be responsible for this nightmare. If his decision turned out to be a mistake, history would remember him as the man who failed to act when it mattered most. The catastrophe he could cause was unimaginable. The tension in the room was palpable, broken only by the relentless sounds of warning devices. The other officers looked at him, waiting for the order he was terrified to give. A moment of hesitation, in normal circumstances unthinkable, in this situation was fraught with consequences. Petrov felt the weight of responsibility crushing him, as if something was squeezing his head tighter and tighter. He realized that the world truly rested on his shoulders now. Finally, driven by instinct, Petrov made a decision. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and ignored the alarm. He chose to trust his gut feeling. He did not inform his superiors, nor did he trigger the machinery of war. The minutes dragged on endlessly, filled with a silence so profound that every slightest sound seemed to echo. Petrov sat motionless. He waited for the worst, for his decision to prove disastrous. But as the seconds passed, no new warnings appeared on the screens. In the end, everything calmed down. There were no explosions, no missiles striking the Soviet Union. Everything indicated that Petrov had been right. The alarms were false. Ultimately, the world survived another night, unaware of how close it had come to the brink. No one, apart from a handful of insiders, knew that on this night, one man, making a solitary decision, had saved the entire world from destruction. Petrov, though torn inside, knew that his decision was the right one. He returned home, struggling to suppress the trembling in his hands. For the rest of his life, he carried the burden of that night, knowing that if he had acted differently, there might be nothing left. Yet his courage to defy the system, to trust his own instincts, and to make a decision against protocol prevented a catastrophe from which humanity might never have recovered. Stanislav Petrov, the man who bore the weight of the world on his shoulders, saved it without seeking glory or recognition. Only he knew how close we came to the edge and how one wrong move could have changed the course of history forever.